Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturient Society.
Welcome back, fellow writers, fellow readers, fellow lovers of winking. That over there is Karissa Harlow, aka Catherine, her dark alter ego, aka Lewis, and I am Ash O'Rourke, aka Tolkien. No dark alter ego here. I am the dark alter ego. And yeah, welcome back. It's been another week has passed. I feel like I
Correct.
haven't slept, but I have, but I feel like I haven't slept in a week. So how are
Fun.
you? How was your week?
I'm good. Much better than last week. Nothing super
That's
stressful.
a relief.
I know my car needed repairs, but less stressful than last week because of the kind of person I am. So that was fine. They're more expensive than I wanted, but
Yeah.
what can you do?
Yeah. So you're saying that was less stressful than your week was last week?
Yeah, like I said, big things are fine. I can handle it. But
That's
like
funny.
basically the repairs that it need. I have a really old car. It 2003, I think.
I love that.
And yeah, I love this car. I don't want a new car. So the
Yep.
repairs were basically the cost of the car if I were to resell it. So my
Yep.
dad was like, "Okay, you need to think really hard. Are you going to keep this car until it dies, or are you thinking about getting a new car soon?" I'm like, "I am not getting a new car until I break down several times in a row and the car just won't survive anymore." Like
That's what I did.
I don't like new cars because they're
But
so
your
expensive.
car is creeping up on the age of my car. My car was
Is it?
23 or 24 when it died.
Yeah,
You're
mine's
getting
on 20.
there. Yeah.
hmm but yeah, I don't want to I don't want to spend the money on a new car.
What kind
Like
of
if
car is it?
I Toyota Camry.
Nice.
So, I mean, I love this car. I've been driving it since high school. I learned to drive in it. And like if I won the lottery tomorrow, I would not use the money to buy a new car because like I just like this
LOL.
car and I hate new cars because they have all the like other fancy features and some of them don't have CD players
Yeah.
and like it's just crazy. I don't like it. But I also don't want to buy a used car because sometimes those then just have their own problems. So
Yeah.
I am gonna ride this car until it is on its last leg and then probably farther. So I was like,
Yep.
I am fine with just paying that money instead of going for a different used car or
I understand.
trying to save for a new one. So
That's what
it
I
was
did.
fine. Yeah.
I just do what I did and just wait for it to break down in a hurricane.
Mhm.
And then you have to leave it in a different city because you've moved. And then you have to save up for the repairs and come back for it just to bring it back to try and get a car dealership to
Yeah.
trade it in.
It's an adventure, Ash. I'll
Mm-hmm.
take it. And really, my parents owned this car before me, right?
Yeah,
So I know all of the owners, and my dad
that's
treats
nice.
cars really well. And I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
that I treat cars super well, but I don't drive it very much. So it's still really good, right?
Yeah,
So yeah,
nice.
it doesn't have a lot of miles on it, is
I love
basically.
that.
So yeah.
Nice. My car now has many, many, many miles on it because it's
Yeah, I
become the
bet.
travel car.
Yeah.
It's become Hobby's car. He takes everywhere for army
hmm
stuff. It is loaded down with miles now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all the repairs were things that time will do regardless of whether or not you're driving.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, you have to do
Yeah,
it and it's fine.
inevitable.
But
Yeah. Nice.
but yeah, aside from that, nothing too big, I don't think. Yeah, how was your week?
That's a great question. Today is Wednesday.
Mhm.
So we talked last Tuesday.
Tuesday, so
Yeah,
slightly
so it's
over a
actually been a
week.
little over a week.
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the last week whatsoever. Don't remember it. Too
Classic Ash.
tired. Classic, yeah. I will say, as of today, I did my nails, so I'm very pleased with how
Mhm.
they turned out. Everyone can see,
Mhm.
red is my fave. I did it for my birthday, my red nails. I
Yeah.
repainted my toenails, which I'm really bad at remembering to do. I only do it a few times a year. And then I just keep like slapping on like another coat of nail
Yeah.
polish. But I did it like the right way. So I'm feeling like very well kept. And I even shaved my legs today, you guys, which is
Ooh.
like huge accomplishment. I did not know my husband was coming home today because he said he was going to come home tomorrow because he always does this, which is very exciting.
Mhm.
But also, I had my hair up in this like gross bun and I had this like a headband on that like slicks all my hair back from my forehead so I
Mhm.
look bald, especially with my hair up in a tight bun. And
Yeah.
so and I'm wearing like gross clothes because I've just been like working and doing chores. Like that's been it.
Mhm.
I did chores. I had a whole work day. I did some more chores. I got on here. And so anyways, I didn't expect him to come home today. So not that I need to make an effort, but I would usually like I would not wear my bald cap thing, you know? I would
Yeah.
like make a teeny bit of effort.
Right.
So that happened. And he was like, wow, this is how you look, huh? When I'm not here. And I was like,
Like, yeah.
I don't want to hear anything because I didn't know you were going to be back today.
Right.
But yeah,
Had no
this is
warning.
how it looks.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, yesterday I crawled under the house and I fixed a leak. So I'm very proud of myself. I like got a shark bite coupler and I cut the pipe with the PVC, not the PVC, with the PEX cutter. And then I jammed the coupler on, and I should say it's not 100% fixed. It's like 90% fixed. Because here's the thing. You have to have the strength when you use a shark bite. It's a little like, it's a cheap way to fix leaks. Anyone who's listening to this who's like, don't use shark bites, they're bad quality. Shut up. We're tearing down the house. I know. Okay. We're
I just
just
need it
going
to last for a year. That's it.
yeah, exactly. That's why we're doing this. But the thing is, you have to like jam it in there. And not only do I have lady hands, I have notoriously weak lady hands. Like it took
Yeah.
me so long to milk the goats because my hands are so weak compared to my
Like,
mom
oh,
and even my
cramp. I gotta
sister.
rest.
Yeah, exactly. Or they'll just like muscle failure. So I
Yeah.
had the hardest freaking time. Plus, it's like a horrible angle because I'm under the house in a crawl space. I'm kneeling in like the wet from the leak, and like I've got bruises all over my shins now from all the rocks underneath the house. And the
Mhm.
last time I was under, there was a snake right by my face, and it was okay. It was just a little baby snake. I scared it. And then, I mean, I was really calm again because, I also, in emergency situations, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, hello. And then I just, backward army crawled away from it and
Mhm.
was like, this is your space. I get it. I'm intruding here.
Yeah.
But there was no snake this time, but there was
Mhm.
fiberglass falling out of like the tarp above me. So it was a great experience. I am proud of myself. But that to say, because of my weak lady hands, I didn't like 100% get the leak fixed. I got it like 90% fixed. So the water was shooting out at high pressure before I turned the water off and cut the thing and put the coupler on. Now, with the water turned back on and the coupler on, there's like a slow like drip, drip.
Just a drip.
So I'm like, it's not good, but it will be okay until like my brother or my husband can get under the house and put the tubes tighter into the coupler. And if I did a really bad job, then we can just take it off, cut the tubing again, and then put it back in. Although hopefully we don't have to. And my brother got back from Italy, so I guess there's that. And he came back with the flu. So nuts. He goes, I just don't understand where I got this. And I was like, are you serious right now?
The plane, the other country,
the other plane, the other plane, the other airport, all of the tourist destinations. You don't know where you got this? I have a few guesses.
I have so many guesses. Let's make a list.
Yeah, it was so funny. I was just like, I mean, I'm upset for you that you're so sick because it sucks to be that sick. But to say you have no idea how you got it, it's just the most comical thing in the world to me.
Ridiculous.
But he brought back some like yummy goodies and stuff from Italy, so that was exciting. Cool. No cheese though, which is a bummer because Italian cheese is the best.
Yeah. Was it you I was talking to? And I think it was my dad about like transporting food across like national lines or state lines and stuff. I always think that's interesting because aren't there laws? Yeah,
there are certain laws
and weird,
and there are certain foods like you can bring back from other countries or take into other countries, and some that you can't. I think we accidentally smuggled back this like sealed like tuna, like you get like a canned tuna, but it's in a pack from Ireland when my mom and I went. We forgot that we threw it in our suitcase because we had just stopped at this little grocery store and gotten like some groceries to live on because we were there for like 9 days. And so we totally forgot that we'd even had them. When we got back and we were like, looked it up, and I think whatever we had was like definitely not supposed to. Like,
not supposed to leave the country.
Whoops, that was definitely an accident. But apparently like there's a lot of cheeses that you can bring back from Italy. We used to make jokes because my grandmother apparently got into a fight with a customs agent trying to bring back cheese for us. Don't know what kind of cheese she was trying to bring back because some cheese you can bring back. So who knows? But yeah, so like he could bring like a lot of like dried food items. So he got me like this risotto pack that has like, but there's no white wine in the house and you have to have wine to make risotto. And so anyways, I wanted to make it, but I can't because I don't have any wine. So no risotto for me. But yeah. So, and I had some Italian hot chocolate he brought back. So I guess that's been my week, which is really just to say that's the last 48 hours, and that is the maximum that my memory I can remember. That's the loop. There is 48 hours. Tomorrow I'll forget those and I'll begin a new 48 hours. Yeah, but it's been decent. So Do you
Good.
have any book recs?
I don't because this is a bad reading year for me apparently. But I'm gonna give one anyway. Like what I mean is that I haven't read anything recently, but I'm gonna give a recommendation because at this point I just feel like I need to start doing that. And now that I've started doing that, of course, my brain will go, great, let's read actual books. So
Mhm.
I'm trying to trick myself really. But the book I'm gonna
Understand.
recommend is Everless by Sarah Holland. I love this book. It's really good.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I have it right here. I'll show. Okay. It's probably backwards, but
So
it has the cool
pretty.
cover with the like hourglass type thing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
beautiful.
and it's really good. Which is all I'm gonna say because I mean it's been a while since I've read it. I think I did a Catherine's Corner on it. But it's very good and I think it's underrated. So that's haven't read it recently, but that's my recommendation if you're looking. I mean, it's a duology, but yeah, I guess you can't really read you can read it as a standalone, but it's a duology. Like the
Yeah.
ending is definitely a little too open to just be a
Yeah.
standalone. And the second one is fine, but the first one is amazing. So,
Mhm.
especially if you're a writer, I feel like there's a lot you can learn about foreshadowing from this one.
Yeah.
So, that's my
Yeah.
recommendation.
My book recommendation actually is a standalone, and for
Okay.
maybe the first time ever, it's not even one that we're reading at That Pretentious Book Club.
Ooh.
I finally am reading the books that have been on my list for a while. We're taking like a little unofficial hiatus at That Pretentious Book Club,
Mhm.
because I'm tired, and also so is Kendall. So we were just like, what if we
Yeah.
just skip a couple weeks? It doesn't really matter. We're just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to actually read books that I have been wanting to read. So I read Ariadne, which I don't remember who it's by, but we
Mhm.
probably most like readers have seen this cover somewhere. It was like a really big a couple years ago. It was a book of the month pick for the book of the month club thing. I don't know if anyone else has that
Okay.
subscription. I skip mine almost every month, except for I got that one.
Yeah.
So it's good. It is a retelling of the story of Theseus, Ariadne, and the Minotaur, the
Mhm.
Greek myth. But then it goes into like Ariadne's like whole life afterwards, which was not, first of all, how I remember her story ending whatsoever. And then on top of it, it just kind of, I started out really enjoying it. And then I started really, really not enjoying it because the
Mhm.
theme just became, this is like more like Ash book review corner than book. It was good. My warning is it actually feels more like a contemporary story, like than a
Yeah. Does it
fantasy.
like
It does.
change too much from the original to feel like
It
a
does.
retelling too much? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It changes a lot from the original. And then also it just kind of became a book about how men suck. And
Ah, so
to
much
be
fun.
fair, I mean, historically, men have not been remotely considerate of women. And it is
Mm,
true that in the Greek myths, the women, the characters tend to end up paying for all of the boys' mistakes. And so
hmm
that was kind of the whole idea of the book. But then even when there was like, so every single dude was a douchebag. And
Yeah.
then we had one character who wasn't. And I was like, oh, this is nice. This will be kind of refreshing to be like, maybe most of them are bad, but not everybody's bad because
Yeah.
you
Here's
can't
the
say that.
reverse. Yeah.
And then it ended up not being that. And I was like,
Oh
okay.
boy.
So, and then like the ending was just tragic, just completely
Hmm
in every way. And I was like, this was so not satisfying.
Yeah.
Um, but it felt like the life kind of drama that like real, it was basically like these are the real life daily struggles of like middle-aged women.
hmm
And because it followed them, the main character Ariadne and her sister Phaedra. It followed them from like like young adults through like being like middle-aged, like with children. And it really just started to feel like this is like a coming of age story for middle women who feel
Yeah.
disillusioned, which felt
Ah,
more like a theme for a contemporary novel. So it
yeah.
felt like there were two really big themes going on, which is that like historically men suck, and then the other one that was the disillusionment of housewives,
Yeah.
basically, which was a confusing combination because together it feels unnecessarily aggressive. It feels like you're blaming one for the other completely,
Right.
which I mean there's a connection. I don't know if it's a cause correlation type, thing. Anyways,
hmm
it felt very aggressive to have those were the central themes, those two.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I mean it was very, very well written. If you guys like Greek mythology and you're into like some more contemporary feeling stuff, like if those themes interest you or you're like, yeah, I kind of like slice of life, like middle-aged drama type stuff, it is your book. It was not my kind
Mhm.
of book. That's not my kind of genre, but it was very well written, so I can't really critique that. So
Yeah.
And now I'm
I
reading this
okay.
book that someone gave me. That if
Ooh,
it'll
someone.
focus. Gee, I wonder who. It's
Yes.
Renegades by Marissa Myers. Chris's Christmas gift to me. She gave me the box set, so I'm very excited.
Ooh, yeah. So real fast on like the Ariadne thing. I am totally blanking on the title and the author, but there is this young adult book that is essentially about like the Minotaur myth, and I think it's from Ariadne's perspective, and it's young adult, but it's as if it were a game show or like reality TV. So
What?
like everything is being like it's not filmed because it's still taking place in ancient Greece, right? But
Yeah.
it's essentially like on display for people to watch as like a game. And so it's the perspective of like she's always being followed by like quote cameras, and she can never like have a moment to herself. And if she does, people start rumors about why she needs to be alone and all this stuff. It's very cool.
Crazy.
And I'm so upset I can't remember the title. It has like I think it's like a pinkish and then like black and gray cover. But it's it was really
sounds like
good.
more my style
It
than
does,
this
and
book was.
it felt closer to the original themes and like also modern, obviously, with that reality TV spin. So
Yeah.
if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then message us because that sounds great. But I think that was also the thing with Ariadne, this book, because I was like, it really feels like we've gone off the rails as far as the themes of the original myth.
Right.
And we've actually talked about that in our episode on retellings.
Yeah, we did.
It's important to still incorporate some of the original themes.
Yep.
But it felt like that really didn't happen.
Yeah. That's usually my biggest issue.
Trying to do, and I think some people probably loved it.
Mhm.
I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. But so that's kind of my book rec, kind of my book review. Karissa sounds more like a book rec. I want to read that one.
Gosh, I need to look up the title or something. But
book
also randomly, so the book I wrote earlier this year, I have a character named Ariadne because I just really like the name.
Yeah,
it has nothing to do with the Greek myth or anything, but it's a fun name. And so I realized I was totally mixing myths because I thought Ariadne was also the spider girl with like Athena.
Arachne or something.
It's Arachne.
Yeah.
And I was like I was planting all of these like spider like foreshadowing clues, and then I looked it up. I'm like, oh my gosh, these are two different people. What if I'm mixing myths?
I mix those up sometimes too.
They're so similar in name. I'm like,
yeah.
And it feels reasonable that the same person that goes like has the Minotaur thing would also like combat Athena on this. So you
you would think so. And there's like the the weaving or whatever that's in that's in Arachne's story. In Ariadne's story, she has like the red twine.
The bob yarn? Yeah, exactly.
So there's definitely some strong connections there. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe someone out there should combine them because I'm already apparently there. But yeah, so that's just if I have ever said anything about like, yeah, Ariadne, the spider thing. I'm
like
wrong.
Red pen point, it's Arachne.
Yeah. Different people. So anyway.
Well, what about our word of the week?
Yeah, word of the week is Habromania. Habromania. And this is a morbid impulse toward gaiety, delusional insanity in which imaginings assume cheerful or joyous manners, or delusional happiness.
This sounds excellent. I mean, it sounds like the Mad Hatter is what this sounds like. Although, isn't his backstory that he has like mercury poisoning or something?
Oh my gosh, is it?
I don't know because the hats and the hat bands used to have mercury in them. I don't know.
It makes sense, maybe.
Yeah, but that reminds me of the Mad Hatter. That's funny. I do think that this ends up being like a character feature in a lot of in a lot of stories. Like when there's like a crazy one, like a crazy character who's like really like happy and all the time in like weird ways. Yeah, that's funny.
But yeah, so Habromania. It's a fun one.
I like it. I like that there's a word for that.
Right?
I wrote a character like this once. I totally forgot what his name was, but he was really into flamingos.
That kind of thing, right? You're just like everything is awesome and you're optimistic and like things are falling apart and you're like, but wait, it gets better.
That's funny. I like that one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So, yeah.
All right. Sweet. Well, should we get into the theme for today's episode? This is one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about dialectic writing. So just real fast for people that are like, what's that? It's when you write in essentially like in an accent or in the dialect of a certain region as part of
Twain.
Dialogue. Yeah. So yeah, just
in the
right. Is it? It's been a while since I've read it. Probably. Yeah,
Very,
that
very
does make
much so.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like right up front, I am not a fan of this. So we'll get some disagreement here, which is good because normally
That's
we
so
agree.
fun. Well, okay, to be
Um,
fair, I cannot point to a modern example that I've liked of it. I like
yeah.
Tom Sawyer. Also, you have to think so. Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain is a book from a
Mhm.
child's perspective about a child from the South in that time
Right.
period. So Tom Sawyer's stories are written in the dialect that Tom Sawyer would have spoken and thought in, and it
Hmm.
would have been used all around him.
Exactly.
Huckleberry Finn, when Mark Twain wrote that, was actually a slightly different dialect because it's written
Hmm.
from Huckleberry Finn's perspective, and Huckleberry Finn had a rougher upbringing and
Right.
was not educated, and so it's told in a slightly different dialect even than Tom Sawyer's, even though they're in the same time frame. And then
Hmm.
there's Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which takes place in like the 40s, I think, in like New York. And the main character is a 16-year-old. So he talks like a teenager in the 40s would have, like lots of swearing. He repeats himself a
Hmm.
lot, lots of slang that really teenagers are the only people who would have used in the 40s. So,
Right.
but these are all like either like they're basically like first person narration, all of them, and like they're really specific to a certain time period and a certain location. So I
Right.
think it's probably really hard to justify writing in a dialect if those two things aren't true. Like you're not trying to like
Exactly.
establish a time period and a location.
Hmm.
And like I said, I've never seen it done in a way I liked in modern writing, but I
Right.
love those examples so much.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, definitely that's the strength of dialectic writing is that it creates a really strong sense of time and place.
Mhm.
So if your story is very specific to the South or a specific place in Britain or
Mhm.
any other country, that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but so here's my problem with it most of the time. I do think there are two versions. So my two examples that come up are Faulkner and J.K. Rowling, which sounds weird, but I'll get to it. So I hate Faulkner. I don't like a lot of the Southern writers because of
Mhm.
this. And
Yeah.
it's because, and this isn't a brag, I'm just explaining it. I read so fast
Mhm.
that dialectic writing slows me down
Yeah.
because it's different. It's not like normal language.
Mhm.
And I have to read it at like a third of the pace. And so I'm just already reading slower, which makes me feel like it's slower paced and like I get
Mhm.
bored. And like you're saying, like with Mark Twain, it's the prose is written this way. It's from the perspective of someone speaking in like that total dialect. This is
Yeah.
on like a writing artistic level, I appreciate it. I see what's being done there and it is effective. But
Yeah.
for me, I just can't stand it. I get too bored. And
Yeah.
I think it's Tennyson. He has like dialectic poems. I think I got through one and then I was like, no, I'm not into
I
this.
remember liking Tennyson too.
Yeah, I like Tennyson's other stuff, which is,
Mhm.
I mean, he's a good writer. I just don't like the dialectic stuff. So I remember reading The Sound and the Fury, which is Faulkner. I got maybe two chapters in and I was like, I literally have no idea what's going on and I don't care because
That's so funny.
I'm so focused on figuring out what is even being said that like the emotion is not there for me, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling. And so if it's been a while since you've read the Harry Potter books themselves, Hagrid is written with his accent, right? His dialogue. He, has like the apostrophes and he has misspelled words to create the phonetic effect instead of the actual word.
Yeah.
So he's given this kind of character quirk or character trait, but only in dialogue because A, Harry Potter is in third person, and second, even if it was from first person from Harry's point of view, he doesn't have that written accent in the book or anything.
Yeah.
And so it's just Hagrid and a couple other characters where their accents or specific dialects are put into the dialogue only. And it still slows me down, but only for that brief period of the dialogue.
Yeah.
So I can handle that and I appreciate that and I like that. So that, I mean, I guess that's a little more of a modern example, but I do think that most modern stuff does it more like that, where you're doing the
Yeah.
accent as opposed to the dialect.
Yeah.
And I prefer it. So, I
I
mean,
think that's true. Well, I
yeah.
think I think the other mistake that a lot of modern writers use, and I mean, this is why I like it when Mark Twain and J.D. Salinger did it, is because J.D. Salinger was a teenager in New York. Mark Twain
Yeah.
did grow up in the South.
Hmm.
So these are dialects they were intimately familiar with and probably
Yes.
used themselves. So they're not going to have problems with consistency. And if you choose to like write with dialect, you have to be really consistent, and you have to know exactly what you're doing and how you're representing certain sounds and certain words and how you're using all of them differently than other people might. Because the people who know that dialect will be so upset. And also, even if you don't know the dialect, you can kind of just tell when it doesn't like hit right, you know, you're like, that can't. So I think that's the problem too, is a lot of people, in a lot of more modern writers across the country, across the world, but especially across the country where we, you know, we're all speaking English for the most part over here, have the differences in dialect, I feel like, have decreased over time. Yes, there's still dialectical differences. Obviously, we speak different in Texas than they do in Oregon. I know, because I lived in Oregon. But it not enough that it would like throw you off, like if I was to write something in like a Texas dialect, you know, like it's basically the same. I say y'all more, you know, that's about it.
Well, oh, sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think in the past it also rings more true when you're like reading historical stuff and it's in a dialect, because there was a broader gap, you know, between the different dialects. That's not really as much of a thing anymore. So it feels over exaggerated to use it now.
Yeah. And to make kind of a nerdy point, I do think a large reason for that is that literacy, of course, is so much percentage-wise greater now in America. Like a lot of the Southern dialect was based a lot in the fact that a lot of people weren't as educated. And that's not, I mean, you want to be educated. Not that that's a negative. It's just that it was so much more prominent, particularly in a certain area. So the way that people were speaking was so much their exposure to language that there wasn't any kind of, you know, quote, proper English coming into their radar, coming onto the radar, right? Now that basically everyone in America is literate, it's less extreme, right? The dialects, I would argue, have more to do with accent as opposed to like actual dialects, right? The differences between regions is accent. And that's because that's the way you speak. So if you're in California, you're primarily speaking to other Californians. If you're in the South, you're primarily speaking to other Southerners. And so the academic understanding you have of language is basically the same across the board, but then the way that you're speaking and probably certain slang words is going to depend on your age group and your region and probably your field of study, you know, and professions and that kind of stuff. So I think literacy has done a good thing there in that it's definitely more accessible to more people to kind of have those skill sets. But that might also be why I don't like it as much, because it is, so much of it is just like incorrect grammar. And I'm not saying that that's bad. Again, artistically, the idea of dialectic writing is really good, right? Because it is very specific to a time and place, and it is illustrating a cultural reality that should be remembered and has its beauty and its usefulness and all of that kind of stuff. But it is more inaccessible, I think, nowadays, because it's just not as common.
Feel alienated. And I mean, that's still true of people who read Mark Twain. They go, oh my God, I mean, he's a good writer, I guess, but the accent is too much, the dialect is too much. So it's just a preference, and that's understandable, because it can slow you down if you're not familiar with it. Probably. And see, I didn't actually enjoy The Catcher in the Rye as much. I mean, I thought the writing was really good, but I didn't enjoy the dialect, and that's not my dialect. However, I am from the South. So even though it was highly exaggerated, obviously, for me, the flow was really easy to follow, of these like little like Southern boys who didn't understand language. So I think it's also, you definitely will alienate some people if you choose to write your prose in dialect. But if you want to play with dialect, and by the way, Americans, don't write in the prose of another dialect from another country, please. No, don't do it.
Unless you've like lived there for extensive periods of time.
There. Otherwise, don't do it. If you have characters, that's fine. You have from another country, that's fine. Just write normal how you would write it. Okay. Your editor can always help you later. That's what you hire editors from other countries to do. Don't try to write in the prose dialect of another country. It's not going to go well for you. But I think that a way that we can incorporate dialectical writing in a like more often into the things that we write is kind of like J.K. Rowling's a really great example. Like for example, for Hagrid, the reason that Hagrid is written with the accent and the words that he is because he speaks differently than the way that Harry Potter speaks, and the story is largely from Harry's perspective. So of course that
Harry notices.
He would notice, exactly. So if you're trying to figure out, oh, where can I include some dialect? Maybe writing completely in a dialectical prose is a lot. It is for a lot of people, and I think
it's hard to keep up as a writer too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it can just be a whole mess unless you're really confident in it and you feel like it's thematically and historically something to do. Like I kind of just think avoiding that's probably better. But think of who is speaking differently than your character, or what way of speaking that's happening in this book would be unfamiliar to your character.
Mhm.
Obviously, the way Hagrid speaks is very different to Harry. And so she wrote it, the way that Harry experienced Hagrid talking. So I
Yes.
think it's okay to indicate accents and to indicate like, like the different like word choice for someone who's, or like people who are they speak English as a second language. Sometimes their word choice is a little different. That's a
Mhm.
great way because you would notice if you're a native English speaker, occasionally you'll notice that someone uses a different word that maybe you wouldn't have used.
Mhm. The
And
more
it's a great
proper
way.
word usually, quote
Yeah,
unquote. Yeah.
exactly. It usually is. Yeah.
Mhm.
So those are like little places where you can put that in. And it's great because it makes the characterization of that other character more authentic, but it also makes like your main character's experience of communicating with that character more authentic. And it's something everyone can relate to versus
Mhm.
alienating everybody or alienating most people by using dialect in your prose.
Exactly. It's kind of like that happy medium where you're getting the effect of dialectic writing, but not so extreme that it's now hi Abby.
Bobby just appeared behind me in the
He
green
did
screen.
out of nowhere.
Yeah, a little
Um,
spooky.
yeah. But on kind of like the Harry Potter point, so obviously Harry Potter became really big in America. Theoretically, all of the people in Harry Potter, except for Dean, right? He's American. They're all
Mhm.
speaking in British accents, right? But
Yeah.
it's not written that way. Because J.K. Rowling, of course, would view that as the normal way of speaking. She probably doesn't even notice it's an accent, right?
Yeah.
But then also because, like you said, Harry is speaking that way. So if Ron and Hermione and Dumbledore all have basically the same accent that he
Yep.
does, he's not going to notice it as anything different. The same way that Americans don't really feel like we have accents, right? I
No.
don't think I have an accent, but I probably do. I just don't hear it.
Yeah. And if
So
you met somebody
that's
from like out in the sticks, like way out in the boonies in
mhm,
East Texas, that person probably does speak differently. But
right.
there are few people, and there are some people like from the New York area that are like, like from native to that area that do
Hmm.
have the New York accent. There are still
Yep.
accents that you could utilize if a character has it.
Yes.
But they are more few and far between here than even in
Hmm.
England, because in England there are so many subjects. This is crazy. If you look up like the amount of
Yeah.
different accents, like really noticeable accents in the different
Hmm.
regions, it's bananas. It's crazy. We don't have that here. We have like a
Right.
little handful of accents that very, very few people really have that are noticeable enough that would be worth indicating in your book.
Right.
But
Well,
and
and
it's fun.
arguably,
But
yeah, arguably because in America we haven't had as many centuries to separate from each other in that way. So the
yeah,
differences are minor, whereas in Britain it's going to be a little more major because they've been around longer.
yeah, yep, it's true. Yeah,
Yep.
we have also they've had like such like a longer history like before like mass literacy, whereas
Hmm.
our history as a united country, or whatever, after literacy, we don't have much at all after literacy. So we
Right.
had a lot less distance to bridge with
Exactly.
everybody speaking kind of the same. So
Yep, for sure.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's also another tip. If you're going to do dialectic, if you're going to do an accent, I should say, and I mean, it's not the same thing as dialectic, but it's related. Um, you should make sure that you're only writing the accent in if it is relevant to who they are as a character for the
Yeah.
sake of the plot. So I think it's A.G. Howard. I think it's the Splintered series. There's a character with a Cockney accent,
Mm-hmm.
and I know now, but at the time I read it, I was like, I do not understand how this is different from the normal British accent, right? Because it all sounds the same to
Yeah.
Americans.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that spoke this way. And this is because, so it's an Alice in Wonderland retelling. It's because he's
Mm-hmm.
from England and
Yeah.
that kind of area. And so it was important to his characterization as an actual character from Alice in Wonderland as opposed to the other characters that are all original A.G. Howard characters. And
Yeah.
so you saw him in a certain different light, and it was important to his characterization. I don't know that if you have a British character at like a boarding school where it's not important that they're British, or in just normal everyday life, or if
Mm-hmm.
you're writing a story about an American going over to Britain or Ireland or anywhere over there, you
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily need to write it all in the accent if
No.
it's not going to illustrate something specific about that character. You can just say everyone was speaking with a British accent, or this person had a British
Yes.
accent, and the
I
reader
made
can
that
choose, am
mistake.
I yeah,
Yeah.
am I going to imagine it this way, or can I just read it as though it's American, understanding that it is in British
Yeah.
accents?
Yeah. And it's hard because when you do something like that, like an American goes to anywhere else in the world, um, And I mean, it is definitely don't indicate accents. Just
Yeah,
you
because
don't
it should
need
be
to do
everyone
that.
speaking that way. That's the
Everyone but
American is the
you.
anomaly. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. The problem is I do think there's a place for using dialectical word choice because like in
Ah,
Ireland, different words mean different things. And
yes.
so that's really difficult. And that's where I will say you have to be so careful. Absolutely hire an editor from that country. If that's your
Mhm.
story, you have an American that goes somewhere else, hire an editor from that country, even if the only job is to just check the dialogue and check the word choice. Because
Yep.
it is, I don't care how much research you do. And this was hard for me to accept because I'm a huge researcher. I'm also a huge language
Yeah.
person. And I have been out of the country many times compared to many
Hmm.
people. Um, but it's not the same as getting a native person from that area to go over your dialogue and make it actually sound like people from that area. So it
Yeah.
shouldn't be huge. It shouldn't be every other word. You do want to find a balance, even if like they're going somewhere where every other word, the word choice is weird enough that it would throw off an American reader. You don't want to go to that extreme,
Right.
but there should be some indication, like in word choice, that it's different, but you don't want to throw people off. So, anyways, you're just using like even like a word here or there. Or
Hmm.
making sure that you're not using a word that means something very different. Like pants, we say pants in America, right? That means underwear in a lot of places in the UK.
Ah,
They call
that's
pants
right.
trousers. So that's
Yes.
something that a UK author or editor or whatever, whoever you
Hmm.
hire, they would notice for you. So that's the
Yep.
kind of thing where if you have Americans going somewhere else, definitely don't indicate the accent, just say everyone has the accent, but have somebody read for those little dialectical differences that are really important.
Yeah, for sure. The one that was always funny to me, I think I watched a lot of documentaries on Harry Potter when I was younger. And so because it was in British English originally, they did make certain changes to the American versions, like it's the Philosopher's Stone, not the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah.
And apparently, in Britain they call erasers rubbers,
Yes.
right? But in America, apparently
America.
that means condoms.
You mean
So
apparently it is what it means.
I know. I didn't know that at the time. So I was like, weird. But you
Yeah.
obviously don't want small children reading about this when if they ask their parents what that is, the parent's gonna be like, I don't want to
Yeah.
talk to you, 10-year-old, about that yet.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. In America, we can say bloody hell, bloody this, bloody that.
yeah.
We don't tend to use it as much, but some people do. But it doesn't
Mhm.
mean the same thing here. It's not the same extremity as it is
It's
over
so
there.
much more extreme over there.
So much.
Ron is
And
like using the F word up a storm in Harry Potter because he's always
mhm,
saying bloody because it means something
that's
so
what
much
it
more
means.
extreme. Yep.
Exactly. And vice versa. The F word is more extreme here and it's not as
Hmm.
extreme over there. So that's the
Yep.
kind of thing you're not going to catch because those are just the ones that we know of. Do you know how many more
Yeah.
there are?
So
Like,
many.
gotta have somebody from the country where your book is set do a pass through,
Hmm.
even if you still have to hire another editor and you're just having it for like, please make sure my word choice is acceptable
Hmm. Yeah, and
for
that's
that.
also one of the reasons if you're gonna do full-on dialectic writing, as in the prose is in dialectic, at least do it with your own native
Yes,
dialect
that's
because
why
that's so
yeah,
hard to edit for one person.
don't do it. If it's not, do not write in dialectical prose unless it is your dialect.
Hmm.
Don't. I
Yeah.
know it sounds fun and creative. Don't.
You can
You can
try
make one
it. I
up.
wouldn't publish. Yeah, that's
You
actually
can
a
make
really
one
good
up for
idea
like a
too.
new
Make one up.
country. Yeah, I did
Yeah.
that once in a fantasy story, and it kind of had a bit of like a southernish feel because that's where I come
Hmm.
from. And if you're from the Northeast or the Northwest, likely if you
Yeah.
pick a fantasy dialect, it'll be kind of like that. It'll be
Hmm.
what you're familiar with. But that was great because I was like, I can hear it in my head, so I can follow my own consistency here, and just I have to make sure I'm following all the same rules throughout, which is still a
Yes.
challenge. But nobody can go, that's not authentic.
Hmm.
Which they would have every right to do if I was writing a real dialect that wasn't my
Yeah.
dialect. That's the problem too, is like if people are picky about how you've written their dialect because you've written it incorrectly, you don't get to be offended. They're in the right.
Yeah.
So it's easier if you really want to write prose and dialects, use your dialect or make it a fantasy or science
Yeah.
fiction and there's like another planet with a different dialect. That's fine. But
I love
don't
this idea.
badly do someone else's dialect.
Yeah, it's kind of like the extreme of I've always said like if you're going to create a fantasy world or sci-fi, have some slang words and like
Mm-hmm.
some made up curse words because
Yep.
people just wouldn't speak exactly the same. But you
Yeah.
could go like totally all out and create a total a totally new dialect. I bet Tolkien did that.
Okay.
It's been a while since I read Lord of the Rings, but I bet
I'm
that's
sure he
totally what he
did.
did.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm sure that he did. Yeah.
Such a Tolkien thing to do.
Such a Tolkien move. Maybe I have a little bit of Tolkien in me
You
after all. Because
do.
I did. I mean, he would probably cringe so hard though, because this is all like proper language and stuff. And the one that I wrote was about these like runaway kids, and it was a fantasy, and they had like it sounded a lot like Huckleberry Finn, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, but it was made up, so it was different. There were different like words and stuff they used. But oh my god, Tolkien would have cringed so hard. It was so grammatically incorrect. But
He would
that
have
was the
appreciated
dialect.
the effort. Exactly.
Yeah,
And
because it was made up, no one could take issue with it.
exactly. I would say if you're going to do that, write down the rules as you go so that you're consistent about it. Because people can criticize you on internal consistency.
Oh
So you
yeah.
want to make sure you're being fair about that. But yeah, if you're going to be like, this is a rule and I don't really have a reason for the rule, it just exists because that's the dialect here,
Yeah.
go for it. That's cool. I like that.
It's great. Yeah, it's fun. I remember
Yeah.
dialect is more word choice than it is accent. So if you're gonna write prose in dialect, don't worry about the accent. Just worry about your word choice, and it will naturally be read with an accent. If you are writing a character's voice in a dialect, you can indicate the accent. You don't have to. You could just use word choice, but you can indicate the accent if it's just a character here or there and you're trying to indicate that they talk differently.
Yeah. I do think that's why like Southern, like the American South examples stick out really hard. No, stick out a lot.
Stick out really
that's
well.
not the right.
Really beautifully.
Yeah, they stand out. Because the thing I typically think about in the American South is that they use a lot of double negatives. And so that's something that you can put in prose that doesn't cause people to stumble, right? You're not necessarily going to be like, what's happening? What are they saying? Like it's not spelled differently. It's just being used in a different context. So I would also say don't try to spell things differently specifically, but just try to get the rhythm right, which is why it's much easier to do as a native speaker, because a lot of dialect is about rhythm and things like that. So like another thing, I feel like California versus the American South, Californians talk really fast. American South talks much slower.
Typically,
so I think, maybe Californians tend to use more filler words like Valley Girl speech and stuff, because they're talking so fast, they have to give their brains a chance to catch up. Whereas in the American South, it's a little slower. It's a little more like, we've got time, like, let's be patient. And that can come across in the amount of words you use in any given paragraph too.
Yeah. So. And also the thing about the Southern dialect, for the most part, is there is at least a little bit of a that's what I'm looking for, importance placed on etiquette, and that's why there are so many backhanded compliments. That
I was going to say passive aggression. It seems like a Southern thing.
Passive aggression is patently Southern. But the reason it comes from is a respect for etiquette, because you wouldn't just walk out, like in New York, hypothetically, this is based on my knowledge of the generalities. It's a lot more okay to walk up to someone and just tell them what you think of them right away.
Yeah, man, I hate that shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Walk away.
If you do that down here, that's just considered so rude. You would want to segue, and you'd want to say it in a really nice way. If it's someone you don't like, you might say, "Oh, that shirt looks so precious on you," which, by the way, bless your heart is not something people typically say anymore. I know everyone always points to it, and yes, it's a fun one. But to be fair, most of the time I've heard my family say "bless your heart" has been in like genuine pity for someone.
It's like an insult. Bless her heart. Her husband left her and she's left with a broken leg. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, exactly. They'd be like, "Oh, bless her heart." Like, they mean it. I mean, it was a catch-all for pity that person. So that's so funny. I don't know where, like, I mean, at least in Texas, that's how it has been. But and it's funny because that one's not very popular anymore. You're a lot more likely to hear someone say, "Oh, you're so precious. Oh, that's so precious." Something like that, Like, we definitely give backhanded compliments down here. That's a patently Southern thing to do. But if you're not from down here, you wouldn't know that realistically, people don't say "bless your heart" that much anymore. Like maybe 80s, 90s more, really even in the early 2000s, "bless your heart" was really falling out of use as a saying. You're so precious, that's so precious, those kind of things. Definitely much more common. Any kind of backhanded compliment, it doesn't even have to be a specific one. We
Right.
don't always have just specific sayings that we say, but the idea of you walk into something, you walk into the thing that you're going to say. You don't just
Right.
say it, which is why even if we talk fast down here, it takes us longer to get to the point, like you were saying,
Yeah.
because you don't just jump into it. You got to walk people up to what you're about to say.
Right. Got to
Yeah,
prepare
you
them
gotta
and make
take
sure
the
it's
time to get
effective.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's also a good point about dialectic writing. A lot of it is just going to be slang and like the very specific word choice that people use. So, I mean, getting the correct like slang or curse words that are common to that area at the time you are writing, not just the stereotype,
Yeah.
is important too.
Yeah. And that's difficult because that's something you can't get from researching, because even if you look it up and someone says, no, this is totally authentic, you might be getting a word or saying that really is more of a stereotype or something
Too
that's not
old.
popular anymore, but it was 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. Language changes so quickly. So there's no way you can compensate with research, like having someone who has lived with and continues to live with that dialect going over it. So there's no replacement.
Yeah. I think I've been trying to think of like a modern example of like truly dialectic writing. And it's been a hot second since I read it, but Monster, I'm gonna forget the author. It's about the black man that's on a murder trial and he's innocent, but he's essentially being held accountable for it. And it's called Monster. It's a young adult book. If you know what it is, you know what I'm talking about. I'm just forgetting the author and blanking on it. But that one is written in definitely more of a dialectic voice, and it is really effective because a it gives you a really good idea of the character, but b, it's also playing into the plot in the sense that because he is speaking so differently, this is kind of the reason that is being given for why he might be responsible. Like there's a communication gap, and so the fact that he's writing or speaking slash writing in this kind of way is really effective to the story. So again, like I said, it needs to be useful to the story, not just something you're doing for fun. But it can also be plot relevant if you are trying to showcase a divide between people. So if you're looking for like a modern example, I mean, that book's at least 10 years old, I think, but it's modern enough that it would probably be a good example. So
I would say surprisingly memoirs, they're not fiction, but they are a really good example of dialectical prose, because a memoir is typically written as kind of a stream of consciousness. And I went through this weird period as an editor where I was just getting so many memoir clients and every one of them had such a unique dialect. But of course it's memoir, so it's completely acceptable. It's the way that they speak. And mostly it was older people. So even, even people who were, kids in the 60s and 70s, there was a bigger difference. There was a bigger gap in language between different places then too. So you could really tell kind of like where they were from and stuff. So the dialectical difference was really noticeable for those memoirs. I don't know if somebody writing a memoir now would be the same thing. There would be some of it for sure. Like somebody from California is going to use words that someone from Texas isn't going to use, and vice versa. So there'll be a little bit of that. But reading memoirs from people who are from the area, if it's in the time frame, if they were living in the time frame, is not a bad idea. Because they are so dialectical. It's so interesting. But I mean that's a good way to do. You still have to do the pass through though with the native from the area. Like you have
definitely get a second opinion from someone that also knows the dialect.
But if you are writing a memoir and an editor tells you, oh, you need to make this sound less dialectical and more relatable, I'm going to say that editors is telling you crap. I'm going to say that's bullshit. Your memoir is supposed to sound like you and how you speak and how you think. And even if it's not grammatically correct, I edited the memoir of a former drug dealer who had spent a lot of time in prison. And so obviously his dialect was extremely different from the Hispanic woman's memoir that I edited next, who was also like 2 decades younger than him. So very different dialects between the two, but both give you like a really interesting and like much more like colorful, authentic picture of who this person is. Because even the way they speak can indicate things about like their background or even how they view themselves, that they choose to speak in a certain way. Because aside from the whole literacy thing that we've talked about, people tend to speak different ways because it's cultural. Obviously, Texas, there's certain things we say because it's cultural. California, there's certain things. But even in smaller groups, when you break it down even further, my family says things differently than other people do. Different minorities to say different things. My family's Italian, so we say certain things. That's an interesting thing to think about too. But if you guys ever write a memoir, and I bet we've all thought about it once or twice because we're writers.
Mhm.
Don't let anyone tell you that it can't sound like you and that you need to like whitewash the
Change that.
language. Like
Mhm.
it can be absolutely dialectic. I think it should be if you have a natural dialect.
Yeah. And if you're editing something like that, or if you are writing it and you're, looking for certain feedback, the kind of feedback you want is along the lines of, hey, don't spell this word differently, illustrate the accent in a different way, right? It
Yes.
is very possible that you're writing it in a way that is going to be confusing. And so
Yeah.
a good editor is going to say, hey, you just need to clarify this, right? You need
Yeah.
to write this in a way that is clearer in terms of meaning and also keep the accent. So there might be
Yeah.
different opinions on how to do that because there's really no standardized way to write
No.
a dialect or an accent because
No.
it's so individualized.
Yeah.
So
And it is
a good,
difficult.
yeah,
And
a
a
good,
lot of it is telling people here is a clearer way you can indicate your
exactly.
dialectical differences
Yes,
without compromising your dialect. It is hard.
exactly.
If you feel like your editor's not getting it, maybe look for a different editor just because
Yeah.
it's not everyone's strength and that's okay. But it is really
Mhm.
important to have an editor who grasps basically like
What
a
you're trying to
translation
do.
of dialect, like yeah, that
Yeah,
you it's important for you to genuinely be you and to speak
exactly.
like you speak, but also to communicate effectively. A good editor should help
Mhm.
you do what you're already doing better, not
Exactly.
change what you're doing. So
Right. So
yeah.
it's not that like a criticism of the dialect is always going to be wrong and don't listen to people. It's just make sure that the criticism is here's how you can make it clearer in this dialect as opposed to
Yes.
you need to take the dialect out.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
100% agree.
I also think too, I don't know, you have to consider how big of an issue this is for you. I feel like possibly dialectic writing is much harder to translate into other languages. Because you can't get that same effect. Like I wonder
Yeah.
sometimes when you have like French classics or Italian classics and this kind of stuff, like how
Mhm.
much of it is lost in
You
translation
do lose a
because
lot,
it's
yeah.
the exact words versus the intent behind it. So like
Yeah.
I talked about last week, I read a certain translation of the Odyssey, and in the foreword, the translator said specifically, I am going for what I think the intent was in the original Greek, not
Yeah.
necessarily the exact words.
I love that.
And I like that, but then of course you're losing exact words because nothing is going to translate
Mhm.
perfectly.
No.
So, I mean, if you're writing in a dialect, just maybe kind of have it in the back of your mind that it might be more difficult to translate. And so that is going to be one of the things that is going to be lost for someone trying to read it in another language one day, if that's the thing that's going to happen that you want to happen.
Yeah.
That it's really going to be most effective for people speaking the native language. And it's
Yeah.
also probably going to be less effective on people that are learning it as a second language or who are not fluent, because again, they're not going to be picking up on the same kind of things.
Yeah.
So I do think dialectic writing is also probably you want your target audience to be native speakers in some
Yeah.
facet, for the most part. So
Yeah.
consider that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's definitely true. Like in Italian there's this word gentile and there is not an equivalent in English. I
Does it
don't
mean
even know how to
something
like
like kind? Is it
it
similar?
means something kind of like kind, kind of
Okay.
like nice.
It's similar
Um
to a French word, which is why I
oh,
asked.
is it?
That's
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
it means
gentile
something.
means
Oh, gentile. Yeah, of course.
mhm,
But there's not a word. We have genteel, which is a
mhm,
word in English, but
right.
it's not the same.
Yeah.
So like there are some words that they're just simply they aren't even dialectical. There's simply not translations for. So whether you write in
Exactly.
dialect or not, your translation is never going to be exact,
True.
but it's going to be even less exact if there's a lot
Yeah,
of dialect,
exactly.
which is
So,
okay. But yeah, I
yeah.
agree. I mean, just be aware that your main audience will be and should be native speakers
Mhm.
of that language or
Yeah.
dialect.
And it's not to say that someone else can't one day enjoy the translation too. It's just they're
Yeah,
going to be viewing it
it'll
from a
be
different
different.
lens. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a different effect. Maybe it's still a
Mhm.
good one if you have a good
Yeah.
translator, but it'll be different. So
Yeah.
if your whole thing is hinging on like dialectical
Right.
prose, just
Yeah.
know it's not going to be the same if it does get translated, which is, like a
Mhm.
way down the road thing, or maybe that's not important to you. But
Right.
dialectical prose is going to be a lot harder to translate than just a bit of dialect or accent here and there.
Yeah, and just kind of small tangent, any kind of wordplay is going to be really difficult to translate. So I
Mhm.
really like wordplay, and there are certain books where I've written wordplay into things, and I
Mhm.
kind of have to sit there and be like, okay, how much do I really want to hinge on this, because it won't translate.
Yeah.
Or it's going to have to take extreme measures, right? So the best example is that when Harry Potter was translated into French, they had to make like Voldemort's middle name Baguette or something.
Oh yeah.
Or like Wanda's Baguette, or like his middle name had
Mhm.
to be something really weird to make the I am Lord Voldemort thing work with
Yeah.
I am Tom Marvolo Riddle.
It's
So, I mean,
difficult. Riddles,
that kind of
think about
stuff.
any kind of like riddle or wordplay.
Hmm.
Yeah, very, very difficult. Anything that rhymes,
Yep.
it's gonna be different. So just know that. And that's okay.
Yeah,
Just know that it will
exactly.
be. Like don't get
Right.
too attached to it, you know?
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
at least say like it'll just be a Easter egg or something for native speakers in this language
Yeah,
that they'll get that
exactly.
maybe everyone else won't. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yep. Um, did you have anything else to add?
I do not, I don't think.
All right. What did I have here? Nope. That's on a different topic. Anyway, that's all I had to say. So, yeah, I
Sweet.
mean, I don't think that dialectic writing is like outdated. It's just not my personal favorite. So I'll
I
say to
love
that.
it.
Yeah.
But I have yet to see any modern dialectical prose that I like.
Mhm.
So I like it with that caveat. However,
Yeah.
maybe you out there, you writer, will be the first. I don't know. Uh,
Exactly.
Especially if you're writing like fantasy or sci-fi with a new dialect. Otherwise, I don't know. It's possible. It's totally possible. It needs
Yeah.
to feel authentic. So
Yep.
I love dialectical writing. I love it, even though I have not seen it done well in a modern way at all. But
Right.
I'm gonna die on the hill that I love it.
You just want someone to do a modern like Mark Twain voice,
Ugh,
and you just want that bad.
yes. Oh, you know what? Here's a little plug for my book, Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World,
That's
by
right.
Ash L. O'Rourke. I would not, you could call the prose dialectical in a really like lightly dialectical way
Oh,
because
yeah.
the character is from Austin, Texas. And it
Hmm.
is written from first person, and I am from Texas. And so the way that the main character speaks is authentic. I guess in that sense, it is dialectical. It probably doesn't come across that way because we actually don't speak that different down here, you guys.
Hmm.
It's not that different.
Yeah. There's
But
light
certain
dialects.
characters, exactly, but like certain characters in the book have much stronger Southern accents because they're from other places in Texas. Austin is a
Hmm.
very urban place. Dallas is a very urban place. You're not going to find a lot of really strong accents. Out far east Texas, out far west Texas, I have family in both areas. You'll find a lot stronger accents. And so I have a couple of those characters that pop in. So I
Yeah.
guess that's a little plug for my book, Space Alien Southerners and Saving the World. It's like a little comedy, action, romancy type book. It's very fun.
Yeah.
I think.
It is. It's
But
fun.
there is actually
Herb.
quite
I
a bit
love
of
Herb.
dialect. Herb, oh, sweet
Oh,
Herb.
so good.
I guess he technically speaks in the dialect too, but
It
he's
does.
spoiler, he's an alien, so from
Hmm.
outer space. Uh, yeah, it's good, man. Anyways, I mean, not that like my writing is good, but like God, I'm like that's what I enjoyed about it so much was I got to like
Yeah.
really play with my own dialect.
Yeah.
So if you guys want an example, I don't think I did a bad job of the dialect or the accents in that.
No.
Hopefully
Yeah.
not, because it is mine.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, hopefully I nailed that.
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I definitely had a like the main character called not the main character, one of the like the characters with a strong southern accent calls people sugar a lot. That is
Hmm.
another that there is a dialectical thing. If y'all want some southern sayings that people actually say, at least in Texas, reach out.
Hmm.
I can tell you what people are actually saying
I
these
know all of
days.
them.
All of the I don't know all of them, but I know a lot of them. A lot of
Yeah.
the ones that people that you see on social media, I'm like, okay, no one said that for like 10 years.
Like, I know you're fake, but whatever.
I'm like, it's funny. I'm always like, haha, good joke.
Hmm.
Not accurate, but I guess it's a good joke. Yeah.
Okay, so real fast, actually, another point. There is a certain argument you could make that most first person books should be somewhat dialectic because they are taking place in the character's head.
It's
And
true.
so if you're like, well, they don't really have a dialect. They probably do, it's just yours
Yeah,
and
it's
you
just your
haven't
dialect.
noticed.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
lean
that's
into a
true.
voice for a first person character.
Hmm.
So I mean, not that you have to necessarily lean into it so hard that it's like Mark Twain style, but there's
Yeah,
probably a certain aspect of
probably is.
dialectic writing being done in first person.
Yeah.
And that might be why you like it and I don't, because you're in first person and I
Because I
write
love
third
first
person.
person.
It all
That's
comes
totally
down to
true.
this.
Everything always does come back to this. I love
Yeah.
first person, but that's true. I think first person is always dialectical. I was thinking about this earlier too, and I forgot to say it. I do think
Mhm.
it's always dialectical. I think that it might not always be noticeable that first person is
Yeah.
dialectical. It depends on who's reading it from where and who wrote it from where.
Right.
Because some accents and dialects are more noticeable to more people and some aren't.
Right.
But yeah, that definitely is a first person thing, and I love it.
Mhm.
I love it so much.
It all makes sense now.
Yeah. God, I love first person. This is
Yeah.
just a me episode. I'm like, I love dialect. I
I love
love
all of
first
it.
person.
I'm just like, I just want to be able to read fast and it slows me down.
Like, get that dialect out of here.
Yeah.
You're like, I
But yeah,
want proper grammar.
exactly. I mean, really, a lot of writers just have their own voices. So if you're writing in a dialectic voice, it's just a really strong voice for the most part, and a
Yeah.
maybe more like group oriented kind of voice, because a lot
Yeah,
of
it
people will
is.
speak that way. So
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, it's not a
Yeah,
bad thing. It's just not my thing.
it is my thing and I love it. I would
Yeah.
love you guys to reach out. Let's chat about dialects. Um,
Mhm.
anything else you want to say about this wonderful topic?
I don't think so. I think that was all. I got a bonus
Sweet.
point there. I didn't plan to say that last one, but I did.
Nice. How's your writing going?
Um, I mean, like not bad, but not great. I don't have a lot of updates. I'm still like experimenting with titles for things. Mostly it's just the organizational part of my brain that's like, I need to get all the documents in order on my computer. And to do
Mhm.
that, I want titles because then I'll know which one is which. So I'm
Yeah.
just like titling things and then letting it sit and coming back and saying, all right, this is a working title. And then a couple days
Yeah.
later being like, all right, I like it enough. I'm gonna call it the title. So that's kind of
Nice.
what I've been doing. It's really weird, but yeah, and it's so silly because I don't know what the odds are that your original like working title is the title that gets picked in like a traditional publishing setting. Like, do they
Yeah.
what is their criteria for changing the title?
I don't know.
So I'm kind of centering entire plots around titles because I just am. But I actually don't think this is a bad thing because even if they do change the title, having a good working title helps you kind of consolidate what you're trying to say and your plot and stuff. So I feel like
I
even if they
agree.
did change the title, it would still have been a helpful thing for me to do. So
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
what I'm kind of doing. Yeah.
I agree. And it usually reflects the theme somewhat, which helps them when
Mhm.
you're like querying and everything. I think it's still very important. So
Yeah. And I think about like I think it's either Jane Austen or the Brontes or maybe both where like some of them have alternate titles
yeah,
because the publisher picked a different one. Is it Sense and Sensibility or
I
one
think
of
that
them
one
had
did
an
have a
original?
different title. Yeah.
Yeah. So some versions of the book will say Sense and Sensibility or so now I do
Yeah.
that on like my first page. I'm like, this is the
Or,
title or this one. So
ooh, I like that. That's a good
it's just
idea.
fun.
That
Yeah.
would help. I'm really bad at titling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my titles are kind of they seem weird. I saw something, I don't know, this is a totally different topic, but I'll say it real fast. I saw someone say that the simplest title is usually the one that sells. And I'm like, I reject that so wholeheartedly because I love random weird titles that I'm like,
Mhm.
ooh, what does that mean? Whereas
Yeah.
like this is actually something I struggle with a lot in fantasy because it's like they're also simple or like too vague for me to understand. And I
Yeah.
just like the middle ground. I don't know. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think. I
I think it's
mean,
about trends because I think
yeah.
the trend went really simple and then it went more intricate and now it's back to really simple. But I
Mhm.
think it's just a trend thing.
Yeah. And I just like I mean, I like my titles obviously because came up with them, but I think they're also very fitting to the books because I'm doing that on purpose. But then, what's the trend going to be if I ever get them published? I don't know. And then I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, so it's probably different in indie versus traditional
Oh yeah.
because their traditional obviously has more money to put into it. So maybe the titles can be a little more varied, whereas indie has to go with like marketing very specifically to the trend. I don't
Yeah.
know. So I'm just putting a lot of effort in this place that I'm not sure will matter, but I think it's still
But it
helping me
matters to
consolidate.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's still
They're cool
important.
titles. And they'll
Yeah.
always be that title in my head, and that's what
Exactly.
matters.
Besides, the more titles that you find that you like, the more options you have to give to a publisher, you know?
True. True.
Yeah. I don't know if they
Yep.
let you. I would assume that they probably do to some extent.
I assume they ask you for input and then they
I
just
would
decide
assume.
like that's stupid, we're not doing that, or all right, let's see if that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, I would assume so. Sounds
Yeah.
like exactly what the process is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
What
experts.
about you? How's your
Um,
writing going?
I have
Nothing
not
yet?
written, but I am going to say
Okay.
my progress is going well because, like I said, I've been reading books for fun, not on my list.
Mhm.
And I've been taking the hiatus from TPBC, which has been really helpful in that. So I'm good. I think I'm like going through a recovery period.
Yeah.
So after like the ghostwriting nonsense and like getting to like read stuff just because I want to, not because it's on my list, which
Mhm.
is so fun. I totally forgot how much fun it is.
Yeah.
So I think I'm good. That was the next step in my plan. I know typically what it takes to get to writing recovery for me, where I feel
Mhm.
like writing again. So
Yeah.
I'm on track if anyone's interested. No, I haven't written yet, but I'm still on track.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's pretty much where I'm at. Yeah.
Nice.
Anything else you want to share with the peeps?
Nope. I think that's it for me.
Sweet. Well, if you guys enjoy this episode, if you wouldn't mind going below and leaving us the best rating that you've ever written, we know you can. You guys are writers. I know you can do it.
We
Go
know
leave
it's in
us the
you.
best dialectical review ever. Uh, if you guys want to follow and or join our writing group, you guys can do that. If you guys follow the link again below in the episode description to our Discord, you guys can tell us about what you're working on. You can talk to us about your pets. You can do whatever you want to do on there and we will see it. But you guys can also message us. We're on social media. We are on Instagram and TikTok. We are the Scripturient Society. Loads of funny stuff and useful stuff on both platforms, all courtesy of Karissa, aka Catherine, aka Lewis. So definitely go check us out if you haven't yet. If you are a writer, you want to. I promise you, you want to. It's worth it. And if you guys want to reach out with something more, long-winded, we love it. Obviously, Lewis and Tolkien over here. You guys can email us at contact@storysirenstudio.com. And so if you guys want to recommend a topic for an episode, you guys can always reach out there or on social media. We'd love to talk about what you guys want to talk about. And finally, if you want to support the pod, you guys can go to storysirenstudio.com. That's our production company. Lots of fun merch on there, more information about the pod. Yeah, we want to know what you guys are working on. So reach out, chat with us. If you have any experience with dialectical writing or your funniest dialect story, there's always good ones. We want to hear it. So I think that's everything we've got for you guys. But until next week, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.